earth does that chord come from? Since his debut album Empty Sky, released in 1969, Elton John has established himself as one of the all-time songwriting greats. Together with lyricist Bernie Taupin, he's had 27 top 10 hits, 9 of them going all the way to #1. And he's so good at making his song forms flow that we sometimes don't notice the incredible chord moves buried inside those structures. So in this video, I want to show you 6 Elton John chord moves that every songwriter should know. And all 6 of these moves come from the same song, his 1973 classic, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is in the key of F, and to get the most out of analysing any chord progression, the best thing to do is map out the chords in the key. And mapping out the chords this way helps us do a few things. It helps us quickly understand which chords we can expect to hear that belong to the key. It also helps us understand where those chords sit in the key numerically, and their relationship to the home chord or the tonic. But it also helps us identify any chords that are outside of the key, and these chords are usually the ones that provide the most interest for the ear. So in the key of F, we have F major, G minor, A minor, B flat major, C major, D minor, E diminished, and back to F. So now that we have the chords mapped out in the key of F, let's look at our first chord move. Chord move number 1, the walk down and turn around. This chord sequence does a number of things. Firstly, it clearly establishes the key of F in our ear by laying out most of the chords in the key of F. Secondly, it gives the song a real sense of movement and momentum from the very first note. This intro could just as easily have been held on the F chord. And that's fine, and you hear that in lots of different songs. But notice how much movement there is when we're moving through the chords at this pace. And that movement really creates a sense of anticipation and excitement for what's going to come next. But what makes it so effective is this bass line. If we actually played these chords only in root position, this is what it would sound like. Now that version sounds really awkward and clunky because we've taken out the elegance of that descending bass line. That descending bass line and those slash chords, those different inversions, are really what make this chord sequence work. And the first little move is a really great move, moving from the root, the tonic, down to the 5 chord off its 3rd. So in this case, it's a C chord, but it's being played off the E. Beautiful chord. And then descending to the 6th chord, the relative minor. That D minor is also a problem if we just stay on the D minor and don't shift the bass downwards. So when we just go, doesn't sound particularly good, but when we shift the bass down to C, it's a beautiful and time-honored sound. And that brings us then to the turnaround at the very end. The turnaround can be thought of a number of different ways, but really we're playing a little F triad here with a C in the bass, which gives us essentially a C sus kind of sound. I've created a free PDF laying out all the chords in each section of this song, as well as chord diagrams for all the inversions I'm playing on guitar. So if you're interested, you'll find the link at the top of the show notes. Chord move number 2, starting the verse on the 2 chord. So the very first thing we hear is this descending pattern from F to F, tonic to tonic. And in a lot of songs, you would then hear this tonic chord being held for the start of the verse. It would be the first chord of the verse section. And that's not necessarily a problem, but we've just heard a lot of the tonic in the intro. What Elton John does instead is pick one of the other chords in the sequence, in this case the 2 chord, the G minor, before going to the 5 chord C and pulling back to the tonic chord in 3rd position. And that's a traditional 2-5-1 that you hear in a lot of jazz music. But what I really want to talk about is making deliberate choices with the chords that we choose especially when we're beginning a section. The tonic chord has this special function of being the home chord. It's home base, it's solid, it's stable. All the other chords are away chords. They've got a little bit of tension in them because they want to resolve back to home. That's how the diatonic system is kind of set up. So when we're writing chord sequences, we're really playing this game of leaving home and then finding ways to return home with some interesting chord choices. In this case, the verse starts away from home and then finds its way back home before leaving again. And this is really effective in creating contrast between the sections because we've just heard the intro use the F chord at the beginning and the end. Now we have the verse kicking off with a completely different chord and it creates interest for the ear. It's something different. It helps establish that we are in a brand new section and it helps keep the whole piece moving forward. Chord move number 3, the flat 7. The entire introduction is diatonic. Even though we hear some interesting chord inversions, all the notes are from the key. The first 4 chords of the verse are also diatonic. They also belong in the key of F. The 2 chord G minor, the 5 chord C, the 1 chord F, 4 chord B flat. But the next chord we hear is an E flat, and it is not in the key of F. It is from outside of the key. And when we hear it for the first time, it really grabs our attention. Now again, it's really important to understand numerically what the relationship of that chord is to the tonic. And if we look at E flat in relation to F, we can see that it's a tone away. So it's got a flat 7 relationship with F. The flat 7 works beautifully as a borrowed chord that you can throw into a lot of different chord progressions. In this case, Elton John's taking a circle of fourths kind of approach, where the G minor goes up a fourth to the C goes up a fourth to the F goes up a fourth to the B flat, and the B flat goes up a fourth to the E flat. So in some ways, the E flat appears at a time that makes perfect sense because we're hearing this circle of fourths continued. But again, it's outside of the key, and so it breaks this pattern that has been established where we're hearing diatonic chords in a sequence. And then the borrowed chord breaks that pattern. And the verse is essentially symmetrical in that we hear the same chord sequence then repeated. The second time we hear the E flat, it's less of a surprise. It's still really effective in breaking the pattern, but our ear is now getting used to it. And this is important because it's going to come back later on and be used in a different way. Chord move number 4, the flat 6, and parallel modulation. So we've worked our way through the intro and the verse, and there's some beautiful chord moves throughout both of those sections. And now we're at the pre-chorus. And the very first time you hear this song, the pre-chorus chords seem to come out of nowhere. They're so surprising. So as a quick recap, the second half of the verse is. Now we get the D flat chord, the flat 6, another chord from outside of the key. And this one really grabs us by surprise. And the way Elton John uses this chord in combination with the other chords that follow is incredible and really takes the song in a very interesting direction. So we've got the D flat, the flat 6, moving to the E flat, the flat 7, moving to the A flat, which is another chord from outside of the key. And because we're hearing 3 chords in a row that are from outside of the key, we can be pretty sure that we've modulated. This song has now changed key. The question is, what key has it changed to? So because we're hearing the D flat followed by the E flat, it changes the way we now perceive the E flat chord. We were hearing it before as a flat 7 of F, but now when we hear it, it's pulling us to the A flat. A flat has become our new key. And so why have we gone to A flat? What does A flat have to do with the original key of F? Well, if we just lay out the chords in the key of A flat for a second, we have A flat, B flat minor, C minor, D flat, E flat, F minor, G diminished, back to A flat. In any diatonic system, we have the relative major and minor, the 1 chord and the 6 chord. They have a special relationship with each other. And in the key of A flat, the relative minor is F minor. Even though we don't hear the F minor chord being played, the relationship between the tonic and the relative minor is such that we think of them almost interchangeably. So we've gone essentially from the key of F to the key of F minor. And that's what's called a parallel modulation. And it's been used in many great songs over the years. So when the D flat first appears, even though it sounds a little random, because it's followed by the E flat to the A flat, it's really serving this function of taking us into a parallel modulation. And then we hear the B flat minor to a C chord. And the C chord is not in the key of A flat. It's in the original key of F. So this is giving our ear the signal that we're getting ready to go back to the original key, which is exactly what happens at the beginning of the chorus. Chord move number 5, the dominant 3 and the dominant 6. The chorus begins with the tonic chord, and it's a really satisfying chord to hear after we've just been through this pre-chorus modulation into A flat. And so the chord sequence at the beginning of the chorus is this. We have F major, A7, B flat major, back to F. Now there are essentially 2 ways to create borrowed chords and use them in your chord progressions. One way is to pick one of the 5 notes that aren't being used, since all diatonic scales have 7 notes in them, and use that outside note as the root of a new chord. And that's what we heard with the E flat and the D flat and the A flat. The other way to create borrowed chords, and it's a slightly more subtle way, is to take one of the chords that already exists in the key and change the quality of that chord. And by quality, I mean the type of chord that you're playing. So in the key of F, that 3 chord naturally occurs as an A minor. But Elton John's playing it as an A dominant. He's changing the quality of the chord from a minor to a dominant. The dominant chord is inherently less stable than the other chord types. It's got the tritone in it. It generally wants to resolve or move on to other chords. And so having the A7 there instead of the A minor really drives the section forward. It gives it more propulsion and more motion. So we have the F to the A7 to the B flat, back to the F. And then we get this chord, a dominant 6. Again, he's taken a chord that naturally occurs as a minor chord and changed the quality of that chord to a dominant chord. And that D7 then pulls us to the G minor, which pulls to the C, and back home. In the second half of the chorus, we go back to the D chord, but this time we hear it as a D minor. So in the same section, we're hearing the D chord being used both as a dominant and a minor. And this is great news for us as songwriters, because what it allows us to do is take any of the diatonic chords and change the quality of those chords. But we're still able to bounce back to the original version of that chord. And in this chorus, we hear Elton John giving us both versions of this D chord, and both are serving a slightly different function. The D7 originally is pulling us back round to the home chord. When we go back to the D minor, you can hear that it's got a little more melancholy in it. We've moved on to a new part of the chorus, and it really helps support the lyric at this point in the chorus. Then we go to an A major, a B flat major, and then chord move number 6, bringing it all together. That D flat chord now appears for the second time. We heard it previously in the pre-chorus. Now we're hearing it at the end of the chorus, and this is possibly my favorite chord move in the whole song. Especially because that D flat, that flat 6, is allowed to ring. It's just held for a little bit longer before quickly moving to the E flat, which we heard also in the pre-chorus. But instead of going to the A flat like it does in the pre-chorus, now we hear it rise to the F. And that in itself is a great little walk-up move. The flat 6, the flat 7, and the tonic, all played as major chords. When we finally arrive at the tonic, we quickly reverse direction and get this sequence. Which is, of course, the same sequence as we heard in the intro. Elton John is masterfully bringing all of the elements that we've previously heard together in this chorus. And this is a great reminder for all songwriters and composers that where possible, we do want to repurpose some of the material throughout our song. It helps the listener actually perceive all of these elements as a cohesive whole. Reusing certain elements and bringing them back throughout the song form actually creates a huge amount of satisfaction for the listener. And so we get the walk down. But instead of resolving to the F chord like we heard in the intro, now we hear the pre-chorus chords come back. Another thing I just want to draw your attention to is the use of the pre-chorus as a post-chorus. You hear this done in other songs, but generally speaking, it's a really underutilized technique. In the case of Yellow Brick Road, we heard many of these sounds introduced in earlier sections, and so when they arrive in the chorus, our ear has had time to adjust to them. We accept them and we hear the chord progression as elegant and smooth and rather natural, even though it's still full of surprising and interesting moves all the way through.